Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Autist Circle number 8. Caspar David Friedrich. And I'm your host, the Bleach Demon, who's apparently very tongue-tied today, and joined, as always, by my imitable co-host, TotalBlackoutPainting, also known as Fat Dave.
Hello. Yeah, today we're talking about Caspar David Friedrich, the German Romanticist landscape painter. And this should be a great one. We've already gone over it on our own. We tried to record this earlier, and right in the middle of the recording, fucking thunderstorm hit and knocked out my internet, blew up my modem and my router, and so had to get that all replaced. But we're up and ready and good to go now. But yeah, so today,
and the worst part was we hit the conclusion. We'd gone through the whole thing, hit the conclusion, and then you were just gone.
Yeah, it was like it was a really good flow too. So hopefully we have as good a flow this time, and I think we will. I think we'll be good. So, we'll just hop into it here. So the first thing is some notes about Romanticism. And this is Eugene Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People from 1830, who Delacroix will be next week's episode. So let me read my blurb here, and then we'll get on with the discussion. So, according to Britannica, Romanticism was a broad artistic and intellectual movement that pushed back against the cool order of neoclassicism and the heavy confidence of the Enlightenment. It elevated emotion, imagination, individuality, awe, the supernatural, memory, and the power of nature. And it really began to take shape in the late 18th century, but it really took hold in the 19th century as industrialization began to sweep over Europe. So it was represented in literature by authors like William Blake and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, as well as Percy Bussey Shelley and Jane Austen, to name a few. And in art by artists like Friedrich and Eugene Delacroix, who we're talking about next week, Theodore Géricault, and J.M.W. Turner. So the movie damn, I'm having a hard time talking too. The movement placed feeling over reason and imagination over order, and the sublime often embodied through nature above the controlled emotional tone of classical art. It was a reaction to Enlightenment rationalism and the emotional dislocation of the modern world. And it arose when many Europeans began to feel that reason was not enough. After revolution, war, and the erosion of older certainties, artists became introspective, reaching outward towards the sublime, the mysterious, and the spiritually meaningful. In that world, Friedrich became one of the movement's purest voices. So next up is the timeline, our fabled timeline here. So we can see that Friedrich, the majority of his life took place during neoclassicism, but also Romanticism had a huge overlap with that. So by the time Friedrich was born, Rococo had already fallen out of fashion, and during his life, neoclassicism was the dominating force, but the Romantic movement started to take hold during his youth and became the favored style more and more during his life. The revolution and the rise and fall of Napoleon shifted attitudes in Western Europe, coupled with the rise and subsequent disillusionment with Enlightenment values, caused by a dramatic shift in the tastes of the world. And this is coupled with the ever-increasing industrialization of the modern world, and people began to feel more isolated and individuated in a world that was once ruled by church and serfdom. Friedrich was one of the most prominent German landscape painters and one of the cleanest representatives of the German Romantic style. His landscape captured the barren, liminal feelings that abounded during the time when people felt less and less like members of a previously established social class. The Declaration of the Rights of Man brought about a new wave of introspection in art and literature that Friedrich expressed through his stark landscape scenes, which reflected the rising introspective ideas of the time. And now we'll jump over and start talking about the man himself. Caspar David Friedrich was born on September 5th, 1774 in Greifswald in Swedish Pomerania. He was the sixth of 10 children, and he grew up in a strict Lutheran household. His father was Adolf Gottlieb Friedrich, and his mother was Sophie Dorothea, and his father was a soap boiler and a candle maker. So, and we talked about this before. So the soap maker and soap boilers and candle makers it wasn't a particularly prestigious profession, but it was a necessary one, and one that allowed him to give his family a more comfortable life. By all accounts, all of the children went to a private school, which there wasn't public schools at the time.
Well, and we really discussed last time we covered this, how this was really truly a solidly middle class job. That his father was truly like the emergent middle class.
Yeah, because he wasn't rich and he wasn't poor. He wasn't part of the aristocracy, but he was a hardworking, he was just a working man. Boiling soap and making candles, which were done by rendering fat a lot of the time. And soap and candles were something that were both in very high demand, although not at a extravagant demand like jewelry. So everybody bought candles. You couldn't just price your candles for the wealthy people to buy it, because everybody needed candles, everybody needed soap.
Right.
So
although you do have different tiers of just stupid stuff I've learned through my life. You've got like different tiers of candle making, to the point where you have very nice beeswax candles versus fat-based candles and paraffin candles. It's stupidly interesting if you have the time and are also paid to learn these things.
Yeah. So his childhood was marked by loss. His mother died in 1781 when he was only 7 years old. And then a year later, his sister Elizabeth died. And then in 1787, his brother Johann Christopher died after falling through the ice of a frozen lake. Reportedly, although not 100% confirmed, but it's speculated that he did this while he was attempting to save Caspar from the ice. So he was trying to save Caspar from drowning, and he himself drowned in the process. And in 1791, his sister Maria died of typhus. And these losses would presage his later themes of silence and mortality and distance and loneliness. His formal training began in Greifswald from 1790 to 1794, where he learned drawing from Johann Gottfried Quistorp, which I would put a picture of him up here, but like I said, I couldn't find a picture of this guy. I found a picture of his dad, but I couldn't find a picture of this guy. And he was an architect and a draftsman, and he gave Friedrich a firm foundation in illustration, observation, and structure. From 1794 to 1798, he studied at the Royal Danish Academy of Fine Arts in Copenhagen, where he studied under Jens Juel, this guy, Nikolai Abildgaard, and Christian August Lorentzen. After completing his studies, he spent time in Greifswald and then Berlin before finally settling in Dresden, where he entered the wider artistic world in life. So this is a portrait that Friedrich did of himself in chalk. So self-portrait in chalk. So as previously stated, in 1798, he settled permanently in Dresden, where he initially experimented with etchings and printmakings. He designed woodcuts, and his brother, who was a furniture maker, would cut them out for him. Dresden was a major cultural center of the time. It was a major cultural center of Northern Europe, where numerous artists gathered, and there were numerous artistic collections there that he could look at, and then it gave him opportunity to show his own work as well. In 1799, he began exhibiting his pieces at the Dresden Academy exhibition. His works would become regular pieces for decades at the Academy, and his meticulous style eventually led him to a prize from the Weimar Art Society in 1805, which was a competition organized by Johann von Goethe, who was a really, it's when I was a kid, Goethe was the person who was advertised to have one of the highest IQs of all time. I don't know if that's changed much now, but he was a German polymath and a very famous figure throughout history.
Well, he also is responsible for probably one of the most famous plays ever written, Faust.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the better kind of Weimar art. You're right, OGM. And then he became part of an artistic circle of people that included Philipp Otto Runge, which this was one of his paintings. This is Birth of the Human Soul from 1806. Now, I picked this to show it because I thought it was just such an interesting piece to come from the 1800s. It looks like more kind of abstract modern art, but it's a really interesting piece.
If you'd told me before showing it that this was something from like 1950s advertising, I would believe that over 1790s.
Yeah, it's a really cool painting. I think a bit ahead of its time.
Very much so.
He was also friends with Ludwig Wittek and the German polymath Novalis, who was another kind of I don't know, almost Goethe style figure, in that he was a writer and a critic, and not known as much as an artist, but known for a lot of academic pursuits. So
if I remember right, Novalis did a lot of kind of it was like political philosophy based on economics for the time. It's been a while since I've been able to remember who Novalis was. So
yeah.
Anyway,
that makes sense for being a German, German polymath. They're going to be a little optimistic about stuff.
A little.
So in 1808, he completed his first major painting, which is the Teschen altar, also known as Cross in the Mountains, which was a recreation of a previous work that he had done in 1806, which we'll talk about shortly. So, let's go ahead and jump over to that one, and then we'll come back and talk about this one a little bit more.
Okay.
So this is our first piece that we're discussing today, and this is Cross in the Mountains from 1806. It's a brown ink and wash over pencil on woven paper. It measures 25 by 36.25 inches or 64 by 92 centimeters, and it's currently located in the Kupferstickenkabinet, Staatsliche Musee de Berlin, or zu Berlin. This was the inspiration for the Teschen altarpiece. It depicts Christ on a cross in the mountains, on a stunning vista with luminous clouds in the background. The treetops give the feeling of a high mountain peak, isolated and above the world. And then the trees and the clouds are rendered in such exquisite detail that this almost could be a daguerreotype photo. Because you pointed out previously, one thing that would set it apart from the perfection of from a daguerreotype, or the realism of a daguerreotype, is the perfection of the clouds, which
Mm-hmm.
because they're very symmetrical, and they follow along really. They gel with the scene really well.
Yeah, and I think it's just something where if you showed this to someone at a bit of a distance, I think they would have a bit of difficulty until they start paying attention to the clouds. Yeah, the trees look very natural. The
Yeah,
rock formation, very natural. It's just the clouds get in a little bit of that uncanny valley.
yeah. So in the Teschen altar that we looked at previously, he claims that the sun's rays represent the holy light of God, which is the three rays you can see.
Yeah,
And
referencing
this
the
is
Trinity. Yeah.
referencing the Trinity, and this is one of his foundational pieces, and his assertion of landscapes as a holy place. He portrays the spirituality in isolation, and it shows that nature is just not a backdrop for the sacred. That can also be a site of revelation and reference. Let's
I
see.
I really love that altarpiece. That's just yeah. I need to find a print of that somewhere for myself.
It really is phenomenal, and the match and the detail. Of course, there's slight deviations between the two because this is on an altar, and of course that's why it's curved like that, because it was painted into a curved altar. Um, the similarities are really are really like, it was really good that he redid it, in a very similar manner. And of course, he does such a good job of capturing that open space, and the amount of detail in this. Like, even on this one, you can see the vines on the cross that he recreated in the altar. The detail in the trees, which is just phenomenal. And this isn't depicting a specific place. It's a picture of a place you've never been, but you feel like you've been there before in a way.
Yeah, it's that very uncanny where you see an image and it's like, oh, well, I must have been there before.
Yeah,
And that feeling of deja vu without actually having any experience with that location.
right. It's a little like nostalgic in a way. So we'll carry on here. So this is a picture of modern day Teschen. The Teschen altarpiece was relatively controversial work at the time. It was created as a private commission for Countess Theresa Anna von Brühl for her family's Catholic church in Teschen, Bohemia. She'd seen the sepia piece and was very fond of it, and wished for a recreation for her altar. She was touched by the piece, and felt that it would be very fitting to have in her family's private chapel. Although the work was not warmly received by critics at the time, and one of the main critics was this gentleman here, who was Basilius von Romdor, who was an art critic of the
I don't know
time.
if I would call him a gentleman.
Well,
From the little bit of reading I did on him in the intervening, yeah, he's kind of a jerk.
kind of a
A
douche,
prick, one
yeah.
could say.
Yeah. Which stands to reason with art critics. I mean, you have to be kind of got to be up your own ass a little bit to be an art critic, honestly. Um, or if you're going to profess to be an art critic to the wider society. So he published a long article decrying Friedrich's use of landscape in a religious context. He rejected the notion that landscapes could convey explicit meaning. And he's quoted as writing, it would be a, quote, veritable presumption if landscape painting were to sneak into the church and creep onto the altar. Which is a real up your own ass thing to say. It's a douchey thing to say. And Friedrich responded with a program describing his intentions in 1809, again comparing the rays of the evening sun to the light of the Holy Father. That statement marked the only time that Friedrich is recorded as a detailed interpretation of his own work. And this painting was one of the few commissions that direct commissions that he ever actually received. And it was heavily defended by Friedrich's friends at the time, the previous people we talked about, and many other art critics. It was really, it was kind of like a fuck you to this guy, basically. Because he comes out and is like, the landscapes. Go ahead.
Yeah, the fact that his big objection was that the fact that it was a landscape. I mean, really?
Right?
That's insane.
Right? It seems like such a nitpicky thing to complain about, but that's really what he did. He was bitching about it being a landscape, and he didn't feel that landscapes were appropriate for religious paintings. But obviously he's wrong. So fuck this guy, and his pompous attitude. So we'll move on. This is actually the Berlin Art Academy, a picture of the Berlin Art Academy. In 1810, this was following the purchase by two of his paintings, which were The Monk by the Sea and Abbey in the Oakwood, by the then Prussian Crown Prince, who I believe you said previously was the father of the first Kaiser. Was that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. So yeah, his son became Wilhelm the First of Imperial Germany.
Oh, okay. So as a result of these paintings being purchased and the prominence that brought, he was elected as a member of the Berlin Academy. I was going to include this piece in our talked about works, but I didn't. I got other ones in there. So, but I wanted to put it on screen because I feel like this is such a phenomenal piece that does such a great job of capturing Friedrich's style and his ability to capture a liminal space, a space that feels kind of in between. It's like, like nostalgia for a place you've never been. Said that before, but it's a space that evokes emotion to you without you ever having to be there. You can look at this and get a sense of what it would be like, and and internalize the feelings of that yourself.
It is the Abbey in the Oakwood is such a haunting piece too.
Yeah.
Now you can see this being the inspiration for Gothic horror movies, things right. Like that.
Like I could see this as a scene in Elden Ring too. Honestly, this is a location in Elden Ring. So we'll move on here. So by this time, he was becoming one of the preeminent painters of the new romantic sensibility in the German world. He moved beyond just being an exceptional draftsman and sepia artist to become a painter of profound and symbolic landscapes. And his landscapes they weren't just depictions of places, but they were emotional and spiritual constructions. And he transformed mountains and trees and oceans and moonlight and distant horizons into a visual language for longing, faith, and transcendence. His art resonated with the world's increased interest in inwardness, spirituality, and the sublime. And in 1818, at the age of 44, he married Carolyn Baumher, or Balmer, who was she was significantly younger than him. He was 44, she was 25, and she was a daughter of a dyer in Dresden. And together they had 3 kids. But 1818 was a really pivotal year in his life. And it was the year that he painted The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog, which we'll be talking about next.
All I know is he didn't have fertility problems.
Yeah, no, he was strong like a bull. So this painting is The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog, which many people will recognize as Tristan Armstrong's avatar, but it's also one of his most famous paintings. And as I said, this was painted in 1818, and this is an oil on canvas. It measures 37.3 by 29.4 inches, or 94.8 by 74.8 centimeters. And it's currently located at the Hamburg Kunsthalle in Hamburg, Germany. The painting depicts a man standing with his back to the viewer on a precipice of rocks overlooking a vast sea of fog. And the image is meant to invite the viewer to observe the scene with the subject. And in doing so, it makes the landscape itself the actual subject of the painting and not the man. The distance of the cliffs and the scattered spires really help relate the vastness of the area ahead of him, the sea of fog. And this is one of his cleanest statements of the sublime. The landscape helps create a feeling of awe and uncertainty. The wanderer has reached a vantage point without a clear path forward. The world before him remains unstable and unknown. And this leads to a somewhat liminal feeling of longing that creates a space of uncertain feelings in the viewer and the subject. And again, this is like the rest, does not depict a specific place. It was assembled from several sketches, and it really gives it more of a dreamlike quality.
I'm having seen landscapes like this for a great deal of my life, where you can get up on a mountain ridge and you look down and it looks like you're out at the ocean, and this captures that, where there's the wisps and swirls, and you'll see like a farmstead several miles off just kind of emerge through this strange sea. It's just great to see that he could capture that in such a evocative way.
Right. And it speaks to a lot of kind of unlimited possibility in a way. As it says, there's no clear path forward, but there's no necessarily clear blockage either. He's looking out at a precipice over this vast sea of fog, and because he has his back to the viewer, you don't get a sense of what he's thinking. And so that allows you as the viewer to kind of step into his position and absorb that feeling yourself. Absorb the feeling of the vastness of the landscape and the vastness of the possibilities. So, a fantastic work, and I'm really, it really is one of his greatest paintings. So we'll move on from here. So as stated previously, in 1818, many things changed for him. He became married, and the tone of his work became a little bit more lighthearted. This painting, which is the Chalk Cliffs of Bruggen, was painted after his honeymoon, and it has a much brighter palette and a lot more light than a lot of his previous works. And the figures have a sense of levity more. There's not as serious. They're not as serious as the Wanderer. Um,
Hmm.
the painter of isolation was beginning to find love, warmth, and companionship in his family, and it was reflected in his art. Go ahead, you were going to say something.
No, I got sidetracked and my brain went out.
Okay, that's cool. His first child was born in 1820, and around that same time, he found support from two sources in the Russian Empire, who was a Grand Duke, Nikolai Pavlovich, the Emperor of Russia, King of Poland, and the Grand Duke of Finland. He sought out Friedrich at the behest of his wife, Alexandra Fyodor- Fyodorovna.
Fedorovna.
Fedorovna, yeah. So she visited his studio in Dresden and returned to St. Petersburg with several of his pieces. Which this is an amazing painting, and I didn't put down who painted this. It was painted by some Russian painter, but I love this painting, and I think it does a great job of capturing the kind of opulence and extravagance of the Russian czars or the emperors.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting. It has a little bit of a throwback to what we saw with the death of Ivan the Terrible's son.
Yeah, yeah. With it does, because it has, there's a lot of the same color and stuff like that in it. So, during not long after the Russian poet Vasily Zhuravsky, who was also the tutor to the Empress and her son, who would be the future Tsar Alexander II, met Friedrich, and they two became friends. So Vasily and Friedrich became very good friends. Vasily felt he found a kindred spirit within Friedrich. And with his assistance and that of the emperor, Friedrich secured decades of patronage by both purchasing themselves and arranging for purchase of his works by Russian royals. Zhukovsky is quoted as saying about Friedrich's paintings, he pleases us by their precision, each of them awakening a memory in our mind, which I think is it's a very good description of his work, because it does awaken a memory in your mind, and it's not something that you know for sure, but it's a visceral feeling that follows from it.
It's very much that familiarity, like that previous painting about the sea cliffs. Talking about that, I mean, I could instantly see places where I've been, where I've seen that.
Yeah.
And he's doing that for all of these other pieces, which is amazing.
Right. So, with that, we'll move into the next piece, which is the Sea of Ice. And this was painted between 1823 and 1824. It's an oil-on canvas, and it measures 38 by 50 inches or 96.7 by 126.9 centimeters. And this is also currently located in the Kunsthalle in Hamburg. And this was originally commissioned by Johann Gottlob von Quandt, who sought two paintings of southern and northern nature. The inspiration of it is uncertain, but it's speculated that this was influenced heavily by Edward Perry's 1820 to 1821 expedition for the Northwest Passage. And the Northwest Passage, to talk about that for a second, is a sea lane between the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean through the Arctic Ocean, near the northern coast of America, via waterways through the Arctic archipelago of Canada. And this was a northern passage that allowed trade to Southeast Asia prior to the construction of the Panama Canal. Of course, sailing all the way down the Horn of South America was possible, had been done before. Those seas are incredibly treacherous, and it's an incredibly time-consuming endeavor to do that. So in order to get from, Northern Europe or just Europe in general to places like Japan and China or even Eastern Russia, um, it was more expedient to go through the Northwest Passage.
Well, that and let's also be practical. The Northwest Passage as a practical route really didn't exist, with the exception of for submarines and icebreakers, until probably the last 15 years or so.
Yeah. During the summertime, they could pass through it, but of course, there was a brief window when they could do it. But Harry found a way to do it.
Mm-hmm. And
Uh,
yeah, but it was very, very limited. Anyway, that's a whole different non-art topic.
yeah, that's a rabbit hole. So
Yes.
it's also speculated that this is influenced by the death of his brother when he was a child. It was first exhibited in 1825 at the Prague Academy Expedition and was titled "An Idealized Scene of the Arctic Sea with a wrecked ship and on the heaped masses of ice." Friedrich studied the flows of ice on the Elbe for details, which is the river near where he grew up. And because it was Northern Europe, it would freeze over, and then you would get giant cracks in the ice and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And this painting really highlights that nature will always be superior to man, as you can see the wreckage of the ship, and that nature will defeat all who intrude upon it. And
I also really, really like the detail where it's not, the ice isn't all just one color.
mhm,
It's got the different shades because it's been near the coast or further from the coast. Yeah,
right.
I like that detail.
Yeah, it captures the frozen muddy water as well as, it's not just a homogeneous white mass of ice. It does have a lot of depth and detail to it. Because you would imagine, as the viewer, you would imagine that brown ice was closer to the shore where you're standing. So it does kind of draw you into the scene as well. This painting would go on to inspire other later painters of Arctic scenes, and it's tribute credited with beginning what's been called Arctic sublime. So it really, the painting strips the romantic longing of its comfort, and it shows a destroyed ship and enormous slabs of ice, and where the wanderer offers meaning beyond the horizon. The sea of ice confronts with the terrifying possibility of what might actually be beyond that horizon. So that's and I picked this because I felt it really did capture the not just the power of nature, but it does capture um, that feeling of loss and longing with the destroyed ship, of course, and the massive flows of ice. It is very awe-inspiring and peaceful at the same time. So terrible in a sense, not of of something horrible, but something that's more awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
Let's see, I'm just looking at how we're doing for time. So with that, we'll just jump over to the next painting, which is two men contemplating the moon. And this was painted in 1820, between 1825 and 1830. This particular version was. And it measures 13.75 by 17.25 inches, or 34.9 by 43.8 centimeters. And it currently resides at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. This is the third version of this painting, with the original being painted in 1820, and a second version with a man and a woman in 1824. And it depicts two men walking up a mountain path, pausing to observe the moon in the night sky. The men are depicted with Friedrich's device of the back-turned figures, which again invites the viewers to project your own feelings onto the men. And contrary to Wanderer, this does not depict solitary confrontation of nature and the unknown, but really contemplation and companionship. One figure rests his arm on the back of the other, which gives the image of friendship among the men and adds an intimacy to the scene. And according to the Met, the moon itself mattered deeply to German Romanticism, and they note that the moon was treated as an object of pious contemplation. So it's not just two men stargazing. The scene carries a devotional and inward spiritual charge. Friedrich turns the night sky into something felt more rather than just merely observed. And the scene invokes a deep nostalgia for, like I said, nostalgia for a place you've never been. The moon is distant and the path is uncertain. The landscape is dim, yet the scene does not feel hopeless. It feels like a place of possibilities as the men contemplate the moon and the world that lies before them. So I kind of look at this as like there's two guys out on two friends out on a walk at night on this hillside path, and just stopping to pause and observe the beauty of nature. And it could be
my alternate interpretation is it's two drinking buddies who are staggering their way home and stopped at a precipice.
Yeah, it could very well be that. Two men out after a night out, which I've been there before, hanging out with a friend, walking home, and just stopping to kind of look at something. Of course, it's in the city now, but if when you're out camping or something like that, when you're out walking at night and observing the moon and the stars, it really is an awe-inspiring feeling. And to have a friend there to share it with, or the one guy has a cane and the other one's leaning on him, it could subtly be depicted as a father and son, or an older friend and a younger friend. It opens up a lot of possibilities and allows you to project a wide range of feelings onto the painting, and in doing so, really allowing you to reflect on those feelings within yourself. Those feelings of longing and loss, like I miss my friends. I miss going out camping with my sons and being able to view stuff like this. Not that I can't do it anymore, but I really I find this such a beautiful and fascinating painting. Because it gives you that feeling and that ability to just admire something within yourself, or to feel nostalgia about something within yourself that you may or may not have ever experienced before. I very much could see me and my best friend out seeing something like this, and just stopping to pause about it. And if we were younger, we would have stopped and had a cigarette here and just shot the shit while looking at the moon. It's
and something else with not just this painting, but the other ones we've talked about, where there's human figures with the back. It feels like you're there, kind of catching up as the in this case the third member of the group, and they've stopped, and it's like you're almost waiting for the guy with the cane to turn and gesture you up there to come and look at this moonlit valley that you can't quite see, but it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can totally see that. Like, and especially with the way the path is, and you as the viewer are on the path coming up to meet your friends and to witness this amazing vista that they've stopped to admire. The view that is so awe-inspiring that they've stopped to admire it. Let's see. And I think with that, we will hop over to the next painting. And this one is the stages of life. And this was painted in 1835, so it was a little bit when he was a bit older. This is oil on canvas, and it measures 28.5 by 37 inches or 72.5 by 94 centimeters. Currently at the Museum der Bildenden Künste in Leipzig. And it was completed just 5 years before his death. And it's an allegorical painting that forms a meditation on Friedrich's own mortality and the transience of life. The scene is located at Utkik, which is near Greifswald, where he grew up. And the figures have been identified as his family. The old man with his back to us is Friedrich. The young boy is his son, Gustav Adolf. The girl is his daughter, Agnes Adelheid, which the older girl is his. Okay, which the older girl is his daughter Emma. The oldest woman is his daughter Emma. And the man in the top hat is speculated to be his nephew, Johann Heinrich. The scene is the Baltic Sea at dusk, and the 5 ships in the sea correspond with the 5 figures. Smallest ships are closest to the shore, representing the young children, while another ship has yet to fully furl its sails. The 2 most distant ships represent the older men, with the farthest representing Friedrich itself, as its full sails carry it towards the horizon. And this painting is an elegy rather than a grim meditation on mortality. The harbor suggests return as much as departure, hinting at the possibilities of life. And this is Friedrich's ode to the liminality of possibility and the in-between. This transition is observed from youth to old age, from arrival to departure, and the sky is open, and the dusk is approaching with a golden sunset. So a few things that it's got, the kid here is holding a Swedish flag because this was in near Swedish Palmaria. So I really
So in other words,
oh, go ahead.
He's really given Prim the business.
Yeah. So I appreciate the sky in this one. I really love I think he did an amazing job of capturing a beautiful like sunset before at dusk with the golden and purple hues. It looks very realistic, which isn't what he was going for per se. He's just trying to capture the landscape in a meaningful way. The 2 ships coming close, like they look like they're coming in to sea, but then the other 3 are kind of uncertain where they're going, which is an interesting point because again, it's the in between. Are they coming? Are they arriving? Or are they leaving? It opens the possibilities, and I think
this is.
Oh, go ahead.
Just I don't know why, but the coloration of this really reminds me of Christina's World that we've already covered in a previous episode. And without obviously Christina, but just that the color palette's very similar, and the main figure, Friedrich himself, it's almost like he's yearning for that furthest ship. And yet that's also that he has something in his way, which is caring for his family. He has to see them launch from the port, as it were, to reach that far horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the distance, the distance and the path in between. So it's a very, I think it's a very wonderful and romantic piece in that way. And again, he's got his back turned, so you don't know You got the possibility there. The children are very, you don't get to see their face, but obviously they're playing. This guy has kind of and it might just be the way the painting is aged. He looks kind of upset, but still,
Mm-hmm.
he could also be welcoming his uncle. Um, so with
Yeah,
that,
it's so hard to say.
it is, and that's one of the beauties of his work is that the the uh the possibilities, the liminality, the openness, um and the space, the the nostalgia that those things evoke, and the feeling that the landscapes evoke in you for um because of how they how they're presented for you. So we'll move into our final slide and our wrap up here. This is a painting of Friedrich as he's older. So, despite his professorship at the Dresden Academy in 1824, Friedrich began to fall victim to the fickle tastes of the art world, and the shift to realism began to take hold on society, and he began to fade from popularity. Um, After that last painting, The Stages of Life, Friedrich would suffer a stroke later in that year that left him partially paralyzed. And in 1837, he suffered a second stroke, which nearly killed him. And then on May in 1840, he died in Dresden, increasingly isolated and largely passed from the popular art circles of the time. And he's buried at the Trinitatis Cemetery. And his legacy would remain and resurface throughout the years. He helped to make landscape painting a major vehicle for meaning in Western art. His works help inspire the Hudson River School and its members like Bierstadt, who we talked about last season. His contemporaries like Johann Christian Dahl, who painted this. This is mountainous landscape with a waterfall. And this was done in 1813. He claimed that Friedrich was a powerful influence, and his works later resonated with Russian painters like Arnold Böcklin, who painted this, which is the Isle of the Dead in 1883, and Arkhip Kunci, or Kuwinci, a symbolist who painted this, which is called Night, which you can see has a very open and similar feeling to a lot of Bierstadt's works. But also symbolist painters like Edvard Munch, who we've all known. We've seen this painting 100 times, which is The Scream from 1893. He claimed to get a lot of influence from Friedrich as well. So, and although his star faded during his lifetime, the power of his art has resonated throughout the ages and has remained as relevant and relatable today as it was during his lifetime. He was there's been a lot of controversy surrounding his art because a certain mid 19th century or early 20th century painter took influence from
what
him
I'm
as
hearing
well.
is someone who was rejected from art school.
Yeah. He's a big fan. His fans include people who were rejected from art school as well.
Something I did a brief read on was that some of some of his art was used as kind of set pieces for a lot of cinema, like Fritz Lang, F.W. Monaro, and I think Walt Disney even used some of the elements of Friedrich's art as kind of like jumping off points. which
Yeah.
made him too pop culture for certain snotty audiences, which is a shame.
Yeah. But they are incredibly evocative pieces, and really, they really do a great job of inspiring in you if you take the time to take them in, and observe the scenes and try to put yourself in them. They do such a great job of evoking powerful emotions of longing, and loss and possibility within you. So I think with that, I'm all done. We can probably wrap it up here. But that's
I think we
been,
can, because
yeah,
it's rare that we get a second pass over the same artist.
right. We had a rehearsal on this one, an unintentional rehearsal on that one, on this one. But this has been Caspar David Friedrich, the painter of longing and liminality from the German Romantic period. Next week, we will be talking about Eugene Delacroix and his paintings of triumph and Romanticism. Really, one of the great French Romantic painters. And yeah, that'll be next week. So with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off here. Thank you all for coming out. We had a pretty good crew show up today, so
Yeah.
appreciate everybody who came out, and who liked the stream. So with that, I'll say,
And if you didn't like the stream, may you suffer having to look at Ode to a Square.
you're gonna have to spend some time looking at Jackson Pollock's.
Oh,
Anyhow,
yeah.
so
Go out, reclaim your art.
Yep.
Real art like this.
Love your art, love your people, and have a wonderful evening, folks.
Take care.